Hi, welcome to the next tutorial in Dmod creation. In this tutorial I am going to go over the MIDI commands in scripting. There's basically 5 commands that I know of with Midis in Dink Smallwood in scripting, or 5 main ones that are used. And they are play MIDI, turn MIDI on, turn MIDI off, stop MIDI, and loop MIDI. Now, play MIDI is pretty straightforward. What that does is play a MIDI file. So basically, it'll stop the currently playing MIDI and play the new one. So let's add another tree stump over here. There's going to be a lot of weird tree stumps doing weird stuff in this Dmod. Make it hard. And we'll call it play M for play MIDI. And let's add a talk procedure. We'll have the tree stump say, let's give it a random color code, and we'll have it say, listen to my music. And that's the current sprite. We'll put a wait 500 line there again. And then just play MIDI, that's one word. And then you just want to type the file name. Now let's go into the original Dink directory, because that's where all the original MIDIs are kept. Only our custom ones are kept in here. The game will still refer to Dink, the original Dink folder. Whoops, sound folder for all the original MIDIs. And let's play battle.mid. So quotation mark battle.mid quotation mark bracket semicolon close procedure. Let's test this out. You can see that works. The battle music has begun playing. Okay, so that's play MIDI. There's also stop MIDI, which will stop any MIDIs that are playing from currently playing. So let's make another tree stump over here, and we'll call it MIDI S for MIDI stop. And we'll make it a talk procedure. Okay, and we'll write stop MIDI, which is one word, open bracket, close bracket, semicolon. Okay, so when Dink talks to this tree stump, the MIDI will start, and if Dink talks to this tree stump, the MIDI will stop. Let's try that out. You can see, talk to this one, it starts, talk to this one, it just stops. That also works for MIDIs that are started with in a screen. So if we go over here, there is a MIDI attached to this screen over here. It's going to lag, but well, see, it starts, and if we go over here and talk to this, the MIDI will stop. Likewise, if we get the MIDI to start from the screen, and we go and talk to this tree stump, it'll stop the currently playing MIDI and play the new one. Okay, so that's stop MIDI. There's also loop MIDI. You can enable this. Basically, we usually enable it on the title screen, and also on any screen that has a save machine, because this is not stored. It's not saved with a save game, so you need to recall this line all the time. But let's add another tree stump. Make it hard. and we'll call it MIDI L for MIDI loop. Make a talk procedure. Okay, so what you want to write is loop MIDI, and it's either 1 or 0. When it's set to 1 it will loop, when it's set to 0 it won't, so we'll set it to 1. And now any MIDI that plays, when it stops it'll just replay itself, so it'll just loop. Let me give you an example of that. There we go. So if I talk to this tree stump, that'll turn the loop MIDI line on, and then we'll go and get this MIDI to play. And what I'll do is I will stop the video and start it again when the song's nearly over, so you can see what I mean by how it loops. Usually a MIDI will play, and then when it finishes it'll just stop, and another MIDI won't play until Dink enters another screen where a MIDI is attached, or a MIDI is played using the play MIDI script line. But as you'll see, loop MIDI actually makes the MIDI automatically replay itself. So stop the video and start again when this is nearly finished. Okay, so as you can see, the MIDI just ended and it automatically restarted itself, so that is the example of loop MIDI. One thing you have to note when using loop MIDI is that it doesn't actually store itself in the save game. So if the player quits the game, loads the game again, loop MIDI will be reset back to 0 and it will no longer loop the MIDIs. Usually this command is used on the title screen, so then it applies to the whole rest of the Dmod, and MIDIs will loop throughout that Dmod, and then the command is also used on every screen with a save machine on it, so then when the player loads the game, that command is set back to 1. So yeah, that's loop MIDI. Now I'm going to show you the last two MIDI commands. It's turn MIDI on and turn MIDI off. Basically what these do is they disable the MIDIs attached to screens. So let's get rid of all these scripts now. We want to get rid of MIDI L. Let's go to our story folder. I'm going to get rid of these because they're not needed anymore. MIDI L, delete that. Delete that tree stump. Let's get rid of this one that's play M from our story folder. Delete that, and we'll leave this one here because I'm going to just use this one to demonstrate the last two commands. Let's edit this, delete stop MIDI, and instead let's write turn underscore MIDI underscore off, open bracket, close bracket, semicolon, and let's go into the Dmod. And basically we know that when we enter the screen to the right a MIDI plays. Let's go and talk to this tree stump first. It's not hard. Don't know why I forgot to set it to hard. And what that'll do is it'll turn the MIDIs attached to screens off, so they won't work. And basically to turn them back on again, you just use turn MIDI on. I don't have to load the Dmod to show you that because that's self-explanatory. It's basically the opposite of turn MIDI off. Okay, let's also delete this script, so it's MIDI S. Delete that sprite. And that is using the MIDI commands in scripting. Hope this video was clear enough for you, and I'll see you in the next tutorial.